Welcome to A Working Record. This is the June 2026 edition, issue number 4, The Motherhood Cost Loop, Reentry Cost, Why Career Breaks Create a Long-Term Motherhood Wage Penalty. Continuity is Currency, Part 2. The Ideal Worker Trap, Why Mothers Pay a Long-Term Wage Penalty for Career Breaks. Before wages are calculated, the rules of participation are already set. Every labor market encodes assumptions about what a worker looks like, not by law, not by policy statements. Assumptions are made in practice in how experience is priced, how promotions are timed, how raises are calculated, how tenure is rewarded. These mechanisms are not neutral. They reflect a specific model of the worker, continuously employed, fully attached, and uninterrupted, and they systematically advantage the worker who fits that model. Interruption is not merely a pause in earnings. It is a structural disadvantage, one that compounds quietly over a career, accelerates at midlife, and rarely reverses. 1. The ideal worker norm. Organizational sociologist Joan Williams named it precisely, the ideal worker, the employee who is available without reservation, responsive without lag, and unencumbered by obligations that compete with work. This isn't the job description explicitly, but implicitly, our careers are dictated by the labor market's desire for the frictionless workers that come without objections or obligations. The model of the ideal worker shapes everything from how performance is evaluated to which workers are identified as high performers and those that are quietly passed over. The ideal worker norm became embedded in employment systems during the mid-20th century when the dominant model of work was full-time, long tenure, male, and supported by an unpaid domestic partner managing everything else, also known as life. That arrangement is no longer tenable. The household model changed, but the employer's ideal worker model has not. Workplaces built around this model reward proximity and visibility, not productivity or output alone. A worker who takes a leave, reduces hours, or exits temporarily is not simply absent. They are departing from the working model, and that departure is priced. 2. Continuous earnings bias. Labor markets do not treat all experience equally. They weigh it. In these times, continuous experience commands a premium. Older experience depreciates. Interrupted experience is discounted at rates that exceed the simple arithmetic of missing years. Research from the ZEW, Center for European Economic Research, documents substantial reentry wage penalties associated with career interruptions, including effects that persist years after labor force return. Workers returning to the labor force do not simply resume where they left off. They typically reenter at a lower price point, with their prior experience partially discounted, their skills assumed to have depreciated, and their commitment implicitly questioned. The market is not neutral. Federal Reserve research reinforces this at the macroeconomic level, finding that earlier labor force reentry after childbirth is associated with wage advantages that persist years later. This is not about skill degradation alone. It is about the way the market signals and prices continuity as a proxy for reliability, commitment, and value. Continuity acts as a currency and a hidden wage multiplier. The worker who never left is not being explicitly rewarded for absence of interruption. The worker who left is being explicitly penalized for it. These are not the same thing, and the distinction matters for how we assign responsibility. 3. The compounding wage advantage. Small advantages, compounded, become large gaps. A raise is not a fixed dollar amount. It is a percentage applied to a base. When the base is higher, the raise is larger. When the base is suppressed by an interruption penalty, every subsequent raise is calculated from a lower starting point. The gap does not close, it widens. Year after year, raise after raise, the arithmetic of continuity works against the interrupted worker, not because of malice, but because of math. This is the mechanism the Golden, Kerr, and Olivetti longitudinal research makes visible. Mothers' earnings remain significantly below fathers for decades after childbirth, even as hours worked increase later in career. The loss is not recovered by returning to full-time work. It is locked in by the compounding structure of wage growth itself. Compounding also operates through bonus and equity participation. Performance bonuses are often calculated as a percentage of salary. Equity grants are frequently tied to seniority. Both mechanisms amplify salary differences, which means they also amplify interruption penalties. A worker who re-enters at 85% of their prior wage does not just earn less, they receive less of everything attached to that wage. The labor market does not merely reward continuity, it compounds it. 4. Promotion tracks and tenure bias. The wage penalty is only part of the story. Inside organizations, the damage to career trajectory often exceeds the damage done to immediate compensation. Internal labor markets, the systems that firms use to promote, develop, and retain workers, are structured around tenure thresholds, performance review cycles, and high potential identification windows. These systems have timing, and timing in labor markets is rarely neutral. Miss the window, and the track closes. An associate who exits at year 3 and returns at year 5 is not simply 2 years behind. They're often categorically displaced, evaluated in a different cohort, absent from the relationships that drive sponsorship, and invisible during the years when leadership pipelines are being formed. Upper-out promotion structures, common in law, consulting, finance, and academia, make this explicit. There is no pausing the ladder. There's only moving up or moving out. An interruption does not hold your place. It removes you from the competition entirely. By the time wages diverge visibly, promotion tracks have already sorted the workforce. The earnings gap that appears at age 45 was produced by a trajectory decision that was made at age 33. 5. Who is interrupted? Across advanced economies, caregiving drives most labor force interruptions, and caregiving is not distributed evenly. The OECD research is multinational and comparative and finds that the correlation between unpaid care work and women's interrupted labor participation are linked. Caregiving isn't a lifestyle choice or a soft life social media campaign, but a structural barrier to the career and earning trajectories of women. The uninterrupted worker model does not need to target women explicitly to produce its gendered outcomes. It simply has to remain the template. The rest follows structurally. The hidden architecture of advantage. None of this requires a conspiracy. No employer needs to sit in a room and decide to penalize caregivers. The architecture does the work. In the ideal worker norm, there are evaluation practices that reward the uninterrupted work. A continuous earnings bias encoded in proximity and visibility signals, a compounding wage structure built into the mathematics of raises, and a tenured promotion track system do all the lifting. Each mechanism is defensible in isolation. Together, they constitute a system that rewards the uninterrupted worker and prices everyone else accordingly. This is not incidental. It is engineered, not by malice, but by design choices that were never examined, never questioned, and never updated to reflect the reality of who does the work that makes all other work possible. The penalty does not end when the worker returns. It compounds through wages, promotions, retirement savings, and Social Security benefits. As long as uninterrupted work remains the template, care work interruption will remain economically expensive. Thank you for listening to A Working Record. This month, the entire newsletter is available to everyone. You will find motherhood wage penalty models and comparisons, frameworks, and interesting developments from around the globe in this month's Substack. Read and subscribe for deeper insights, and share. I'll be here next month as we continue discussing the Motherhood Cost Loop, specifically the health cost. Thank you for listening to A Working Record.